There's a human rights activist from Canada that I really, really want you to meet. Her name is Yasmine Mohammed. She is the author of Unveiled, and I want to talk to her about the real battle that the West is facing. Now that we're in it, I think we're in for a real. Well, no. Only those who have closed their eyes are going to be surprised by this. We're not in for a shock. We're in for a great awakening, honestly, because if you haven't seen what's happening in Europe, if you haven't seen what's coming on our own streets, if you're not reading the tea leaves and seeing how this is going, hello, New York City, you're a fool. You're a fool. You're blind, or you're just, I don't know, incompetent. But Yasmine is here. She has written a book that is unbelievable. It's called Unveiled: How Western Liberals Empower Radical Islam. Yasmine, are you on with me tonight, or is it just this radio hit here? Hello, Yasmine?
It's just this radio hit, but I mean, I'd love to be on with you tonight if possible.
Well, may I suggest something different? Are you, do you have about an hour that you can spend with me right now? I'd like to extend this.
Sure, let's do it. Absolutely.
Okay. So, because it's important, I want to talk to you about what's happening with Iran and everything else. But I really think that we should start with your childhood. I mean, it's remarkable the life that you lived and have lived through, and with no help from Canada, had to endure as a childhood. Can you start? You were born in Vancouver to an Egyptian mom and a Palestinian father. And then your parents got a divorce at 6. You stayed with mom, and then mom married an Egyptian who she was one of 2 wives, right?
Okay.
Or did he have more than 2 wives?
Well, he could have up to 4, but he only filled up 2 slots. Yep. My mom was a second.
Yeah. Okay, so tell me about your childhood. What was your childhood like?
So first of all, Glenn, thank you so much for having me on, and thank you so much for reading my book and for helping to bring light to this darkness. My childhood was unfortunately something that is quite common around all over North America, Europe, obviously the Middle East, but we don't hear the stories because people are afraid to speak. So as you mentioned, my parents they grew up secular Muslims, my mom in Egypt, my dad in Gaza, and they moved to San Francisco, got married, had my sister, and then eventually moved to Canada, where their marriage fell apart. And like you mentioned, my mom married an Egyptian man who at this point was what people are calling an Islamist or a political Muslim. Basically, he was just religious.
Can we stop on this for a second? Because this is something I'm going to talk about tonight, and it is so important to understand the difference between a Muslim and an Islamist. Islamists are wickedly dangerous because it is political in Islam and does not necessarily have anything to do with regular Muslims, correct?
That's right. So a regular Muslim could be somebody who was open to, democracy and freedom, somebody like Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, who I co-founded the Clarity Coalition with. Yeah, he's an amazing man. He's an example. Yeah. But then, of course, there's Islamists, which can go, anywhere from a political Islamist like Mamdani in New York all the way to jihadis like ISIS and Hamas, etc. So those are people who are wanting to...
You would put this new mayor of New York, or the new mayoral candidate that won his primary last night, in the category of an Islamist?
I absolutely would. Yes, I absolutely would.
Why?
He is somebody who is extremely dangerous. He's built his entire platform on Islamist talking points. I mean, let's just start with the fact that CARE put $100,000 behind him. CARE is a group whose leader said that they were happy about October 7th. So it's very clear that these people follow the same ideology and the same goals as groups like Hamas. They're doing it in different ways. Hamas are more like they're jihadis because they're using violence, but an Islamist won't necessarily use violence, but they will use duplicitous, insidious means exactly like what Mamdani is doing, which is using secular laws against itself, which is, these thinly veiled, calls to globalize intifada. That is a thinly veiled incitement to violence. I've spoken to people who have survived intifadas in Israel, and what we're talking about here are people riding on a bus and the bus is blowing up, people sitting having a pizza and then the pizza parlor gets blown up. This is what they're asking for. This is what they're saying they want to globalize. So I don't even know how thinly veiled that is. But when somebody is your mayoral candidate and is calling to globalize the intifada, and then for that person to win is really disheartening. It really makes me feel so sad and angry and terrified about the future of our world.
Okay, so let's get back to your childhood. So you are, with this new father, riding a bike, listening to music, celebrating birthdays, swimming lessons, playing with non-Muslim friends, not happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything became haram. Everything became forbidden. So all of those things you mentioned, and then, of course, hijab was put on me, which is the head covering. I had to cover everything except for my face and hands up until I was 19, where even my face and hands got covered in black as well. So, yeah, it was a complete shock. I hated every minute of it. But, of course, I was terrified. There was nothing I could do. I was scared. And at one point, there was just a brief moment of time where I was able to go to a public school because the Islamic school did not yet have a high school in place. And in that year, I was able to connect with one of my teachers, Mr. Fabro, who wrote the foreword for my book. Okay.
Wait, before you get there, tell people when you failed at home, tell people what happened to you with your feet and your ankles and everything else.
Yeah,
tell people so they have an understanding what you were going through when you met this teacher.
Yeah, so you talked about not being allowed to have non-Muslim friends. That was, I cannot overstate how important that was for us to understand the difference between us and them, Muslims and non-Muslims, good and bad, good and evil, actually. And so in one of my books, I had written my name as Jasmine instead of Yasmine. I just changed one letter. And when my mom and her husband saw that, they interpreted, oh, this girl wants to be Western. She wants to be Canadian. She doesn't want to be Muslim. She's preferring their way of writing her name instead of our way of writing it. So we need to teach her a very strong lesson so that she learns and understands that they are evil and we are good. And so their way of doing that was to hang me upside down in the garage. Muslims have the celebration of Eid where they slaughter an animal every year and they hang it up in the garage. And that was the hook that they used to hang me up on, and whipped me. And they whipped places where it will be hidden. When I was younger, it was the bottom of my feet. But later, when I started wearing hijab and my body was covered anyway, then they could whip more comfortably wherever they wanted. And her husband hung me upside down and whipped me to the point of me passing out because I was crying so much and I couldn't breathe. My whole, my face, my nose, my throat, my eyes, everything was filled with mucus. And I woke up from passing out, and I could hear them talking. And my mom was upset. She was freaking out. She's like, what are we going to do if you killed her? We're going to have to explain this. She was concerned that they would be in trouble with the authorities if they had killed me. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't even that they were concerned about the fact that they had killed me.
What was that like to hear that from your mother?
I mean, I can't forget it. I can't forget a lot of the things that she said and done. It's really important for me to highlight here that she wasn't like this. She was nobody in her family was like this. Nobody in Cairo, where she grew up, was like this. But once she became indoctrinated into this ideology, and once she married this Islamist man, she turned into this monster she was such a zealot, and her ideology and her, anti-West, pro-Islam, it just possessed her mind, and that's all that mattered to her. Even her own kids were nowhere near, like, we didn't even register in her, in the things that she cared about. All she wanted was for Islam to win and for the West to be dismantled. And if it meant that she had to, beat her daughter up to get her daughter to understand that that's what needed to be done, then she was fine to do that. In fact, she was fine to kill me. When I took off my hijab, I had to escape from her and run for my life, because she was so angry at the fact that I would take off my hijab and act like the infidels, act like the non-Muslims, and to be like them. So it was, it's so hard to explain how somebody's mind can be so brainwashed, so indoctrinated, so possessed with an ideology, but hers was.
So, Yasmine, I have to tell you, my heart just breaks for you and all of the people that are in this situation, because, we hear these stories, they're bad parents, really bad parents, really, 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 really dark people that have children. But this is not the same. That's
right.
This is, explain the difference.
Well, I guess the best way for me to describe it was, this was an analogy that Sam Harris made one time, and I thought this is a really good way of describing it, so I'm going to borrow it from him. But he was saying, when you have a Jehovah's Witness family, for example, and they've got a little daughter, and she's going to die if she doesn't have a blood transfusion, if they refuse for their daughter to get a blood transfusion, you don't look at those parents and say, those are evil people, those are bad people. You say, oh my God, they have been indoctrinated to believe that killing their daughter is the right thing to do, that allowing their daughter to die is the correct thing to do. So you recognize that they have been possessed by this ideology, and it is making their humanity, it is suppressing their humanity, and it is suppressing it to the point that they're willing to watch their daughter die. And that's really the best way to describe this. Islamist ideology is the exact same thing. It is stemming from a religion, but it is so toxic, and it forces people to completely diminish their humanity and put this ideology first, regardless of who's going to be a victim.
Okay, let me take a break, and then I want to take you back to high school, where you meet the teacher and what happens with the teacher. You're hearing Yasmine Mohammed. She's a human rights activist. She's from Canada. She wrote a book, came out right around COVID, or I think right around 2019, 2020, and it's called Unveiled. And it is a must read. And we're going to finish our conversation here. I'm going to hold her as long as we possibly can hold her up from her day to have this conversation, because I find it absolutely fascinating, horrifying, and prescient. It is what our next 50 years is going to be all about if we don't wake up and stand up right now. Yasmine, welcome back to the program. Thank you so much for changing your day for me and making this switch.
It's my absolute pleasure and honor to be here, Glenn. Thank you so much for having me.
We were talking about how you were beaten as a child, hung upside down by your feet, by your ankles, and beaten until you passed out. You were 13 years old. How old were you in that?
At that point, I was like 10 or 11 years old.
10 or 11. At 13, you go to a public school for the first time. You leave the Islamic school, and you go to a public school, and you're in Vancouver, Canada. And you find a sympathetic teacher that you feel you can confide in. How did this happen? What did you say? And then what happened?
Well, it actually happened in a really interesting way. I was so excited over the fact that I had so many friends for the first time in my life. because I was going to a public school and there's so many people there, and I was normally going to like an Islamic school. So I was writing out a list of all of the names of my friends. And my mom came by and saw the list, grabbed it from my hand, and, you know, I'm not stupid. There were no boys' names on that list. It was all girls. And so I thought, well, this will be fine. It's only girls' names. But no, she was so angry that I had made friends, and she was so angry at the fact that I was excited and happy about it. She thought sending me to public school with hijab on, that I was going to be ostracized and bullied, and that I would learn that these non-Muslims were nothing but trouble, and I would learn that I wanted nothing to do with them. But instead, I made friends with them, and I was happy to be there, and that just killed her. And so she decided then that I was no longer going to continue school. She's like, that's it. You're being homeschooled from now on, which basically meant you're staying home and, you know, cooking and cleaning. You're not going to go to school anymore. And so I had to finish the year because she couldn't just pull me out. And it was like the very end of the school year. And I was just depressed. I was sad. I didn't know what to do. And who was my drama teacher, came up to me and he's like, Yasmine, you're so different. Like, what's going on with you? Your light is totally dimmed. And
where did you see him?
Just outside of my drama class.
Okay.
Yeah. And I said, I told him what had happened. You know, I told him my mom's going to pull me out of school, and that this was like my first breath, my first, you know, moment of like a bit of freedom was to come to this school and to, you know, live a little bit of freedom for a bit of my life. And now she's going to take it back from me, and I'm going to go back to forced to be living with, forced to not be able to go to this school anymore. And so we talked some more about it, and then I eventually confided in him about all of the abuse that was going on in the home. And I shared with him everything, not knowing that as a teacher in a public school, it was his, you know,
responsibility,
he had to.
legal
responsibility. Yeah, it was his. You got it. Yeah. So it was his legal responsibility to contact the authorities, and that's what he did. So he contacted the police, and then they contacted child services, and then there was this whole investigation. So it was the three of us, and then his two children as well. So it was 5 kids. All of us were questioned and everything about him. Mind you, his daughter had gone to school the year prior with 4 fingers on her face, like bruised on her face. And one of the teachers called the authorities at that point and said, I think this child is being abused in the home. And when they asked her, she said, no, it was an accident. Those aren't fingers. Nobody slapped me, whatever. And she denied it, but they still had a record of it. So when I came forth with my complaint, this was the second time that Child Services was getting a complaint from this man. And still, after we went through the whole investigative system and the whole court case and everything, in the end, the judge said, this is a cultural issue. This is a religious issue. He has the right to discipline his kids how he sees fit, and it's not our place to intervene. It's not the government's place to intervene. And they knew about everything, Glenn. I had told them about all of the beatings with the belts, and I told him about the hanging me upside down and everything. And they still said, well, you know, that's just your culture. That's just your ethnicity, your religion, your race, your whatever, that you're just going to have to endure.
What did this cost you?
Yeah. It cost me really my sense of ever feeling like there would ever be a way for me to escape. Because as much as they were trying to teach me and train me that non-Muslims were evil and non-Muslims were bad, and I never believed it, because my teachers, like Mr. Fabro, just the people in the stores, average folks, my friends, my non-Muslim friends, they were all, proving that she was a liar and that she was wrong and that they were all good people and they didn't want me dead and they didn't hate me. But when this happened with this judge, it kind of made it all come tumbling down. And I was like, you know what? Maybe she's right. Maybe they do hate me. Maybe they don't want me to be saved. Maybe they do want me to live in this misery for the rest of my life. I mean, for a 13-year-old girl to stand up against her parents in a court of law, and for you to tell that 13-year-old girl, no, you have to go back to the house where you just told us about all of the torture and punishments that you're enduring. You know, like what that judge did was he sentenced me to a life that was worse than the one I was complaining about, because now they were able to not only treat me so badly, but it came with humiliation. It came with the psychological torture of, now what are you going to do about it? Now who do you think you're going to complain to? You think you're going to go to the police? You think you're going to go to the child services? Nobody cares about you. This is it. And so I felt like there was nowhere to go. And I felt like they were right, that nobody cared about me. And Allah's plan was what was going to happen, which was that I was going to remain in this house until I, married the man that they made me marry and had the babies and just did the job of a dutiful Muslim girl. And I saw absolutely no escape. And that was the first time I tried to commit suicide.
Yasmine, you are describing a Handmaid's Tale in so many ways. And yet the left does not seem to care. Why?
Mm-hmm. I feel such a betrayal, and I'm so disappointed that I can't really even answer that question logically. I don't think they could either, honestly. They are just so hell-bent on this destruction, this dismantling of Western civilization, that they're willing to link hands with people who chop off a girl's clitoris, who make little girls get married when they're just children, who throw gay people off of rooftops. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, how can you be so hell-bent on your focus on destruction of the West that you're willing to link hands with people who are supposedly, according to what you are preaching, supposedly believe in the antithesis, the complete opposing values that you believe in. But yet we've seen this before. We've seen this in the Islamic regime of Iran. That's exactly how this regime came into power, is they linked hands with the socialists and the communists and the progressives on the left. And that is exactly what they did in order to dismantle and to bring down the Shah and for the Islamic regime of Iran to take its place. And then what did they do? As soon as they got power, all of these useful idiots, all of these lefties, they just either murdered them, they threw them in prison, they disappeared. Some of them were able to do what they usefully after they're finished with them, after they get what they want, after they've used them. And we've seen this happen over and over and over again. History keeps repeating itself, and now it's all over the Middle East, and now it's happening here in the West yet again. They've perfected their strategy, and there's no reason for us to continue to fall for this same ploy. Like, we've seen it happen before. We know how it ends, but there's just so much arrogance. Everybody thinks, no, this time it's going to be different. We're going to be different. We're going to succeed. And they don't realize that, for example, this guy, the mayor of New York, when he's making a rap song supporting Hamas, celebrating the 5 leaders of Hamas, you know what I mean? And then people voted for this guy. Hamas are the ones that are raping women, that are killing babies, that are, what are you voting for? Who are you supporting? Like, and then they say things like queers for Palestine or gays for Palestine. What are you doing? They would murder you. They have murdered gay people in Palestine. They still do.
They do.
And how are you supporting somebody who wants you dead? Like, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So I honestly can't answer that question for you. All I can say is they must be so indoctrinated that they're not even using their rational thinking skills at all. They're just seeing their little tiny simplistic memes on TikTok telling them oppressor, oppressed, white, brown. This is your little equation. Everything can fit into here, right? good guys wear white hats, bad guys wear black hats, and there's no gray area, there's no nuance. It's simplistic thinking, like Sesame Street level thinking for simplistic minds. And it unfortunately works. And what's really sad is it's working on our Ivy League university students. It's not just working on your average uneducated or young people.
You know, I feel sometimes like I'm a self-educated man, and sometimes I just feel like it's such a boob on how much I've missed. I just said to my staff, and I don't know if you ever watched me or know anything about me, Yasmine, but
of course I do.
I when I was at Fox, I said every night, and it was a prompting from God. I mean, He told me, fall on your sword on this, and so I did it every single day. That the communists, the leftists, the Marxists, the communists, the anarchists, and the Islamists would band together, come after Israel, destabilize the Middle East, then Europe. It would travel over here, and it would be the end of the Western world if we didn't wake up. And I was just mocked relentlessly for that. And we're seeing it happen in real time. And tonight I'm doing a show where I'm showing you what's happening in Europe. I'm showing you what the stage is here. And I just said to Nathan, one of our researchers and writers, I just said to him a couple of days ago, I said, would you do me a favor and research the end of the Shahs? Because what we know about the Shah is that, he was corrupt and he was, a puppet of the United States, and that's what caused everything. I said, but I don't really know how the collapse really happened. All I know is they were listening to rock and roll music. They were dressed like, Westerners, and the next thing it's Sharia law. And I said, how does it happen so quickly? Because that's what I feel like is coming for Europe. And for you just to say, and that's why I feel so foolish, for you to say that this was the Islamist and the communist and the socialist and all of those people working together, how did I miss that this has been already done before?
Yeah, it's unfortunately already been done before, and it's been successful before. So that's why they keep repeating it. And it's unfortunately successfully happening today. We can, like you said, everything you said was prophetic. It's happening right now in real time. We're watching it happen. After October 7th, a lot of people were just staring in shock and horror at how quickly everything could erupt, at how quickly things could change. And those of us who've been paying attention were just devastated because we could see this happening. We were watching it, but still, I have to say the speed of it was shocking to me. Like by October 8th, they were already celebrating paragliders and celebrating Hamas and screaming "gas the Jews," and it did not take a heartbeat. They did not for 1 second, bodies are still warm, and they were already turning on the victims of October 7th. It was absolutely mind-blowing. They didn't even have they dropped their masks completely. They didn't even pretend to care.
I know. I said recently that, even the Germans tried to hide it. The Germans tried to hide their atrocities. These guys put it on Facebook and put it on X and Instagram. It's insane. They're proud of all of this.
Yeah.
I've only got 2 minutes left, and then we're going to break, and I want to talk to you about some other things. But can you just tell me, you were forced to marry at 19. How did this nightmare finally end for you?
Yeah. So at 19,
in 2 minutes.
My mom. Yeah, I'll be very quick. I'll try my best. So my mom chose a man who she said, and I quote, who is strong enough to control you. And so she chose an Al-Qaeda terrorist. And I was forced to marry him. Literally, he's in prison in Egypt right now for his terrorism. He's got a long story behind him, but we don't have the time for me to get into it. But obviously marrying him, somebody who would beat me and swear at me and spit on me and cover me head to toe in black. He used to cover the windows in paper to make sure that if the curtains moved, nobody would see me inside. Literal prison with this man. And I had to accept being raped and beaten by him because according to the hadith and the Quran, a man has that right to do that to his wife. And so who was I going to complain to? If the creator of the universe, if Allah the Almighty has sanctioned this action, then what am I going to do? So, of course, I ended up getting pregnant, and I had a young daughter. And when him and my mom started talking about taking my daughter to Egypt to get female genital mutilation done on her, that's when I had to escape.
Yasmine, we're going to continue our conversation with you here in just a second. I don't know, honestly, how you can be a human being and hear this story and not feel to the center of your being how evil this is and how it is only right and righteous to stand up against it and wake your neighbors before it's all of us. One of the things that is changing in my life is I'm going to be very, very, very focused on a few things, and trying my best to stand up and be very clear on the things that I think are real dangers. And Islamism is probably the greatest threat to the Western civilization right now, and it is a fruition of the chalkboard that I told you about in 2009. That Islamists and radicals and communists would all gather together, and they would try to destabilize the world. They'd go after Israel, then Europe, and then it would come to the United States, and it would be the end of the Western civilization. And we're here. And if you don't see it yet, watch tonight's special on Blaze TV, 9 o'clock Eastern Time. It'll be on my YouTube page, youtube.com/Glenn Beck on tomorrow. But we're going to lay all of this out for you because it is really important. And then beginning next year, I'm going to be doing some things that will empower you to take steps to be a leader in your own life with your own friends and your own community, because we are going to need citizen leadership. So listen to that at glennbeck.com. Also, you might want to go back if you just joined us and listen to this whole hour. I've spent an hour with her so far with Yasmine Mohammed. She's a human rights activist. She is the author of a book called Unveiled: How Western Liberals Empower Radical Islam. She wrote it back in 2019. It was released in 2019, but it is so powerful right now. Right now is read this book, Unveiled: How Western Liberals Empower Radical Islam, because it is exactly what I'm talking about, what is coming, and exactly what we're seeing on our own streets. She just spent an hour talking about her background, and it's brought me to tears several times. I don't know about you, but let me bring her back on. And Yasmine, thank you for holding again. And I want to talk to you about how the war with Israel and Iran and then the United States coming in, there's people that say Donald Trump is selling out, all of his values because he's getting us into another war. I don't think he is. I was a little nervous about us dropping, the bunker buster bombs ourselves, because to me that is an act of war, and worried about how they were going to retaliate, because I think I know their sleeper cells are all over in the United States and in Europe. But I'm torn because this is something we have to take care of. Every president since Bill Clinton has said we cannot allow them to have a nuclear bomb. But I don't know if they do or not. But destabilization over in the Middle East is not worked out to anybody's advantage. But I'd like to point out, I haven't seen any of the major players in the Middle East, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, UAE, even Syria, say anything at all about the Israelis. I think they're all right in line with, okay, go ahead and chop the head off of the snake there. Do you think I'm reading that wrong?
No, I think you're absolutely correct. Of course, yes. You're talking about destabilization of the Middle East. Iran is the major funder of terrorism across the Middle East. Everybody knows it. Syrians are victims of them. Israelis are victims of them. Everybody, right? Afghanis, around. Everybody is victimized by these funders of these purveyors of terrorism. So yeah, that's why you're not hearing anybody complaining, because they're fine with it. They're like, yes, please go ahead and cut off the head of the snake. it is scary. Obviously, war is scary. Nobody wants war. Obviously, I was very concerned for the people of Iran, very concerned for the people of Israel.
Correct.
And
Correct.
them dropping bombs in
And
Qatar
us.
as well. There's military bases there. Yeah, of course.
All of us.
All of us, but sometimes it's necessary because the Islamic regime of Iran have already shown us how incredibly evil and bloodthirsty they are in the 50 years of their reign. They could not be more clear. They have said it over and over and over again, how they want to see all of our destruction. And they have no problem murdering their own people. Do you think that they're going to have a problem murdering Americans or murdering Europeans or Israelis or, anybody else? They don't care. This is all for their belief system. They have this ideology that makes them believe that what they are doing is righteous, and that's all they can. They are single-mindedly focused on that. And, people think, I actually had somebody say to me once in the most naive way, he said, if Israel is annihilated, then Iran will just stop. Then it will be over. Then everything will be okay, right?
I had somebody call me on the air years ago and say, we don't have a problem with Jews. If we just didn't have all these Jews, there wouldn't be any problem with Jews. I'm like,
God.
okay.
So
I know.
The truth comes out.
Dumb as a box of rocks. Can you take me through? I wasn't aware of the prison that was hit.
Yes.
Which is not a nuclear target. I don't think I have heard this from anyone. Can you explain this? What happened and why it's so significant?
Well, Evin Prison is where they put all their political prisoners. So basically anybody who is protesting against the regime or women who are imprisoned for not wearing hijab, right? So it's a prison that's full of innocent people who are fighting against this regime. And so for one of the bombs from Israel was almost like a gift from the heavens for it to come down and open the doors of that prison so that people could escape. It was a message to the Iranians that we see you, we hear you, we support you, we acknowledge you, we understand what you are fighting, and we're here to back you up. And so it really filled us all with a sense of hope that this could finally be it. Because you have to remember, Glenn, the people of Iran have been fighting this regime since day one. They've murdered hundreds of thousands of people almost immediately after they took power, whether it was women who were refusing to wear hijab or whether it was people who were refusing to bend the knee to their regime, right? And they have constantly been doing that every single day, executing people, throwing them in prison, disappearing them. And so the Iranian people have been fighting for so long, and this felt like a moment where they could finally be free from this regime.
Think of the meaning behind that after we went back and forth, if that's even true, about, bombing Auschwitz, bombing the train lines so they couldn't, can you imagine if we could have set those people free? And we never did it.
Yeah.
And now the Israelis with that experience saying, we're going to set these people free because they know exactly what the regime is. I think that's amazing. Let me ask you this. We've had regime change in the Middle East, and it never really works out really well.
Yes, this is true.
However, is there it's because we've never found a Nelson Mandela. We've never found somebody who is strong enough that has been standing up against. I don't think the Shah is the guy. I mean, I've never seen him before. He's not leading, press conferences for the last 40 years saying this has got to stop. Who is it that could lead that?
I think that they don't need a person right now. They need a democracy, and I think that's what they want. And really, I agree with you what you're saying about Pahlavi as well, because that's just going back to monarchy. A lot of Iranians, of course, are going to disagree with me, and it's up to them to choose what they want for their future of their country. But I think that the reason why regime change has never worked in any of the other countries in the Middle East is because the people were so different. They were not the Iranian people. They were not the Persian people. So these are
Right.
people who have been colonized. They have been colonized by this regime. This Islamic regime of Iran has, criminalized them, practicing their own traditions, speaking their own language, killing, minority groups like the Baha'is. This is what they do. And so the people of Iran, it's not like they believe in the ideology. They don't believe in the Islamic regime of Iran. They are prisoners. They are hostages in their own country to this regime. Whereas that the same can't be said for, Iraq, for example, under Saddam Hussein. The reason why it turned into ISIS after that was because the people were believing the religious ideology. They were into that sectarian divide between Shias and Muslims, and they didn't see a problem with the ISIS taking Yazidi women as sex slaves and burning them alive if they refused. They were okay with all of that because that was part of their ideology too. Whereas the Iranian people do not agree with this ideology. Most people in Iran are atheists, Zoroastrians, Jewish people, all sorts of different religions, but they are not these religious extremists that the Islamic regime of Iran are. Those are a completely like a foreign entity, that like a toxic foreign entity that has taken over their country.
I have so many people that I know that maybe have stopped watching news, or they just think it's all bad news and nothing ever changes. And I'm doing this special tonight on what's happening in Europe. What is happening in Europe, I think, is just terrifying. I have told my wife and kids I'm taking my granddaughter to Paris. I'm not telling her this because she's young, but I want to take lots of pictures because I think that 10 years from now it may not look anything like this, and we might not be able to go to Europe and be safe. And I feel like we're in the 1930s, of Europe. And how would you get the average person who is not paying attention, or who says, oh, this is hyperbole, and, what do you know? What would you say to people when you show them things that are happening, not just in Europe, but in our own country, a.k.a. what happened in our streets with the Free Palestine riots, and what is happening all across, Michigan and Minnesota, and now with the new election of the possible mayor, at least the Democratic candidate was elected, who was for the intifada.
Yeah. So people who don't see a problem with anything are living in this privileged bubble where other people's problems are not their problem. They're not seeing it. So when I was in France, there were areas of France that I would go to where I would physically feel unsafe and, to be honest, just triggered, like PTSD flare-ups, because I'm seeing groups of Arab men, loud Arabic speaking going on. There's nothing like you look at the buildings and it's like, this looks like a French building, but there is nothing French about this environment that I'm standing in right now. I'm not even hearing the French language as I'm walking around this market. All I'm hearing is Arabic. So it is absolutely the same thing like I was saying about Iran, and same thing like so many countries, 57 countries around this world are Muslim majority. How did it become that way, right? They were colonized by these people. And so what ends up happening, it's like this slow frog boil. And most people aren't going to see it until they see it. And once they see it, it's too late. And the example that you were giving of us here in the West is exactly that. If you're not hearing the Quran, or if you're not hearing the Adhan, blaring in cities across the U.S., then if you're not living in one of those cities and you're not concerned, you have the privilege of not caring, right? But the people that are living in it, let's talk about the UK, for example, like all the pockets of like Luton and all those areas that it's horrendous. It's literally like, I don't know what to tell you. It's like little pockets of Mogadishu and, Tehran in the middle of the United Kingdom. So
Yasmine,
if you don't live there, then people just don't have a clue.
thank you for being so brave. Thanks for being on the program and kind of let me wreck your day by rearranging all the things you had planned. The name of the book is Unveiled: How Western Liberals Empower Radical Islam. It is a must read, and we will have you on again. Thank you so much, Yasmine. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Glenn. I appreciate it as well. Have a wonderful day. Take care.
You too. Yasmine Mohammed, author of Unveiled: How Western Liberals Empower Radical Islam. She is so very right on all of this stuff.